Okay, I'd like to convene the Ways and Means Committee, and we do have the minutes from April 29th. Representative Khan, it looks like you're doing some paperwork there.
Yes.
Representative Khan moves approval of the minutes for April 29th, 2013. Any discussion? Seeing none, then all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. We have two bills up today, as I mentioned previously. This morning we're taking up House File 956 by Representative Hortman, and then we will convene after session and take up House File 950 by Representative Nelson. The floor session begins at 10. That's why we're dividing the meeting into two parts. Now, I should announce and thank Representative Hortman. We have bagels at the front of the room, and Representative Hortman brought those in, so thank you very much. And members, looks like she brought plenty, so feel free during the
Chair,
meeting.
I'd like to move Representative Hortman's bill immediately to the consent calendar.
Right. All those in that reminds me, though, I don't know if there's anybody here that served when I chaired the Education Committee for several years, but we actually had competition among the committee members as to who had the best bakery in their district, and people would periodically bring them in. Representative Harry Mears from White Bear Lake probably has the prize for the greatest distance. He was originally from Green Bay, Wisconsin, and there was a bakery in Green Bay, and he would have baked goods shipped in from Green Bay. So, but the every single year, the old-fashioned donut shop in Crystal. Now, keep in mind that the chair represents, at least today, much of Crystal, and did have the old-fashioned donut shop in his district. And that bakery always won the prize at the end of the session of having the best donuts. Nobody ever challenged the ruling of the chair. So at any rate, maybe we're starting a new tradition, Representative Portman, but you're not actually on the committee. I'm talking about the committee members. I already had a conversation with Representative Davids. Now I'm publicly putting him on the spot.
Monday.
Monday, okay. So at any rate, Representative Hortman, you did give us a brief overview the other day of your First Amendment, but we didn't take action on it because, if members recall, we were just right near the very end of the meeting, and so beyond it being presented, we didn't act on it. So, Representative Atkins, would you care to move the bill?
I think I already did, Mr. Chairman, to the consent calendar.
Okay. We don't
buy in that? No, I'd be happy to put the bill
You'll have to
before
modify your amendment.
We don't have a
consent
consent calendar anymore.
No,
No, I'd be happy to move House File 956 be recommended to pass and refer to the General Register.
Okay, and Representative Atkins, would you care to move the First Amendment?
It's my understanding that's an author's amendment, and I'll move the amendment.
Okay, so Representative Atkins moves the DE4 amendment, and that was the one that was presented the other day, but Representative Portman and I talked briefly, and we thought she should recap that one before we adopt it, because it is a significant amendment. Representative Portman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. The DE4 was the version we opted to put in front of you rather than a page and line, to show you the difference between the House File 956 as it left the Commerce Committee and the new version. The difference between House File 956 as it left the Commerce Committee and what's in front of you in the DE4 is that previously municipal power agencies and cooperative power associations were covered in the bill, and the DE4 was our attempt to extricate them. After we posted the DE4, we found out we didn't fully extricate them from the new state solar policy, and that's why you also have an A29 amendment that further extricates the municipal power agencies and the cooperative power associations from the solar state policy. The state solar policy is modeled on both our previous success with the wind policy and our current program in conservation improvement. how we got the wind industry going in Minnesota were renewable energy production incentive payments, and then a goal, and then a standard. And that's the same format we use to incentivize the development of solar energy in Minnesota. The DE4 has this only applying to investor-owned utilities. And after we adopt the 829 to the DE4, completely extricates the munis and the co-ops. We had an hour-and-a-half meeting on, not yesterday, but the day before, I think that would be Tuesday, with the munis and the co-ops, and there were 3 remaining sections that they had problems with and 2 sections with language changes that they want. We are going to be able to accommodate every change that the munis and the co-ops have asked for. I didn't have time to get the proper amendment before you, but we'll be deleting 3 sections that they have problems with on the House floor and accommodating language changes in 2 others.
Okay, any discussion on the amendment? Representative Beard.
Well, Mr. Chairman, this is a huge policy leap, and this is not a policy committee, I guess, but this year it's going to be a policy committee. Mr. Chairman, this DE4 amendment is an amendment that should be, I think, vetted in a setting where people have the time, the expertise, and the ability to call down experts over quite a period of time, not just a matter of an hour and a half, but a bill of this reach and this scope deserves weeks of vetting and contemplation, because as the author just admitted, putting something this big, taking a $10 billion industry and jerking the collar like this bill does, creates all kinds of unintended consequences that we're trying to fix on the fly here. And we're talking about electricity. We're talking about the master resource that makes everything possible in this state, from grain milling to making pacemakers, and we're going to jerk them around like they're just sort of a car out for a test drive here. Mr. Chairman, I could go on for hours just asking witnesses to come down and talk about just the first 3 comments that the author made. And I know she's got the best of intentions, but if this is such a darn good idea, why are we exempting the municipals and the cooperatives from this incentive, from this whole new program? Maybe that's my first question, Mr. Chairman.
And Representative Beard, before we get too far into this, this question has come up repeatedly about the role of this committee.
Yes.
And I did some additional research from, requested it from what we had the other day. The 2011 and 12 session, there were approximately 186 amendments offered in committee. 6 were delete everything amendments. Some of them 20-some pages long. Mm-hmm. That was under the control of your party. Mm-hmm. When Representative Knobloch chaired this committee, there were 10 delete everything amendments in 05 and 06. So what we're doing here is not unique to the Ways and Means Committee. I just want that because this has come up in several meetings, and I'm just responding because you happened to bring it up today. So I think that needs to be understood. We are the last stop before the bills hit the floor. Representative Hortman has mentioned that as chair of the Energy Committee, she has been working with a variety of people as the bill has been sitting here in Ways and Means, and that's the purpose of these amendments. So just want that history understood. And as I mentioned the other day, one of them was not the least of which was the Viking Stadium. Mm-hmm. That was a $1 billion project that was the strike everything amendment that was offered in this committee. So with that, we don't need to debate that, I don't think, any longer, other than if the previous chair wants to comment, that's fine. Representative Holberg.
Thank you. Representative Carlson, I think that while certainly there were amendments, if you look at the nature of them, the policy changes are far different than adjusting numbers, et cetera. So certainly there are amendments in committee. But, for example, what we have here in front of us today, it's my understanding that as this bill was introduced, there was under the net metering facilities a standard of 1,000 kilowatt capacity. In committee, the change went down to 105 kilowatt capacity, and now we see back in front of us undoing what the Energy Committee approved, going back up to 1,000. So, those kinds of things make me really uncomfortable. We are not experts in energy in this committee. We're undoing recommendations and changes that were done in the committee that has the expertise, and I think people are very uncomfortable with that.
Mr. Chair.
I was commenting on the process. Representative Hortman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. The DE4 does not contain policy provisions that haven't been heard that are new. The 1,000 kilowatt limit was discussed, and the IOUs is my understanding, comfortable with that. The reason why the 105 was in there was to accommodate munis and co-ops, and Representative Falk's interest in changing net metering to be more pro-consumer. We heard the 1,000-meter limit in House File 956 as originally introduced. We heard it in House File 773 as originally introduced. And so this is not new. That wasn't discussed and wasn't contemplated in the policy committee. The bulk of the DE4 is taking the munis and the co-ops out. So we're not changing the policy. We're changing to whom it applies. And I think in the legislature what we want to do is listen to stakeholders and take into account their concerns and make changes in our bills that respond to concerns that have been raised by people. And if members are under the belief that they have to go back to a policy committee anytime they agree to make a concession or a change for an interested party, then I think there'll be much less negotiating and much less compromise. And so what I bring before you in the DE4 is a lot of concessions by me to interested parties.
Okay, Representative Beard.
Well, Mr. Chair, thank you. Back to my original question, why are the co-ops and the municipals, why is it not a good idea for them if it's a good idea for the IOUs? I'll remind you there are 4 IOUs in the state, and municipals and co-ops, well, if you count the trade associations, there's probably 10 or 11, but if you count all the individual ones, there's scads of them. Madam Chair, you know as well as I do. But why is it a good idea for the big guys and not a good idea for all the other big guys?
Representative Hortman.
Mr. Chair and members, size is the biggest difference. For municipal power associations and cooperative power associations, there's a large variety of sizes that they deal with. Also, when you look at the policies all over the country, I had passed out to you, hopefully you got the color map with the 16 other states that have adopted a solar policy. For the most part, they exempt munis and co-ops and apply their solar policy only to their IOUs. So we looked at what the other states were doing, and we thought that made sense here, and so we decided to adopt those changes here.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm concerned about this megawatt. We're going back to a megawatt now for the net metering provision, and there had been some, Madam Chair, I wish there had been a lot more robust discussion surrounding the whole net metering process, because over the last 2 to 4 years we've tried to revise the net metering because of the injustice, inequity it perpetrates on neighbors, especially, well, everywhere. It doesn't matter if you're served by Excel or if you're served by Otter Tail or Shakopee Public Utilities. There's a basic inequity there that we've been trying to address that this bill does not get to. In fact, by going to a megawatt, I would submit you're going in exactly the opposite direction. Mr. Chair, I don't know if the chair can answer that, but I know that there are people in the audience that would like to speak to that. And if something's changed since yesterday, and now they think a megawatt's a good idea, that's news to this member. And I'm pretty engaged in this whole topic. By the way, Mr. Chairman, I love policy, so I wasn't complaining that this is a policy committee. I'm just telling you I enjoy policy because this is where the real work gets done about how things work. But, Mr. Chair, if I may, I'm looking at a couple of the spokespeople for either Excel or Otter Tail that I'd like to come down and explain what changed and why they've changed their mind on the megawatt limit for net metering.
Yeah, we do, being that we have probably a different set of players here, we don't take general testimony because that's been done in the previous committee, but we do entertain questions from committee members to people in the audience. So
Mr. Chair, if I could,
one or both of them would like to come down.
If I could comment while they're coming down.
Representative Hortman.
The net metering issue is one that we need to delve into in depth. There are some members of the legislature that would like to make it more generous to small generators. There are some munis and co-ops that have a real problem with the way the system exists, and I think next year in the Energy Policy Committee we'll be delving into that to try to strike the right balance. And this bill attempts to leave the status quo except for the change in size. And in my discussions with Otter Tail, Minnesota Power, and Xcel, the 1 megawatt change has not been raised as an objection to the bill.
Okay, if you could identify yourself for the record.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, I'm Rick Evans with Xcel Energy. I think I see something correct on both sides, but I think I need to make clear. We didn't have an objection to raising the limit to 1 megawatt if we dealt with the hidden subsidy that exists in the net metering system. When a person puts a solar panel up on their rooftop, they are able to cut their kilowatt hours and thereby reduce their bill. And to the extent that that requires us to burn less fuel to create energy, that's appropriate. They shouldn't have to pay for it because they're creating their own fuel. But there's a lot more to delivering energy to that household than just the fuel. All of the wires, all of the poles, all of the infrastructure right back to the generation source are also included in those kilowatt hour charges. And none of that can be reduced because they put a solar panel on their roof, and none of it got any cheaper because they put a solar panel on their roof. And if they're not going to pay for all the kilowatt hours that they were before, then their neighbors who don't have a solar panel, who can't afford to put one up, are going to have to pick up the slack. And that is the problem with fixed costs and how they are paid through the utility rates. And our number one priority coming into this session, when we knew we were going to be dealing with distributed generation and solar generation on people's homes, was to fix that problem. And we don't have a problem with going to 1 megawatt if we fix that problem. But this bill doesn't fix the problem. This bill specifically says that utilities cannot charge fixed costs back to those customers. And so what we've done is we've taken what was a 40 megawatt limit and we've increased it to 1,000 megawatts. And so now larger customers, larger businesses, people with larger roofs, people with larger pieces of property are going to be able to cause this cost shift to be even greater. And so we don't object to increasing the net metering limit to 1 megawatt, but we object to increasing it without fixing the problem of this of essentially causing the people who can't afford to put solar up to subsidize the people who can.
Mr. Chair.
Representative Hortman.
And we continue to work on this issue. What we have in our bill is a new payment methodology for solar projects called value of solar. And we combine that with a buy all, sell all principle, which means if I put solar panels on my house and I'm an Xcel customer, which I am, that I would buy all my energy from Xcel just like anybody else. And that I would sell all my solar energy to them, and they would pay me a value of solar rate that they've calculated that represents the true value of solar to their system. Now, we don't have all the details worked out of how this would work, and we haven't come to total agreement on that. There's a version of the language in the Senate that I think is better for the investor-owned utilities at this point. And so this is the topic we continue to talk about. We did have a little 10-day hiatus in our conversations about the details of the bill. And we got a 40-page proposed list of changes on Sunday evening. And I know that Mr. Evans has been working with Bill Grant of the Department of Commerce, the governor's representative on this issue, and the Senate Council to accommodate some of the changes that they've raised on Sunday evening into the bill. And I'm very open to continuing to work with the investor-owned utilities, especially now that we've addressed all the issues that we had outstanding with the munis and the co-ops.
Okay, Representative Beard.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just taken aback by the last comment that we're going to have 40 pages of work being done in a 10-day hiatus, not in a committee room like this with TV cameras and the public paying attention. I don't think there's going to be anything nefarious afoot, but when we're trying to jerk a $10 billion a year industry around on a 10-day notice, I'm going to hark back to the Viking Stadium. Now there we actually had bipartisan work on a deadline, a specific deadline that was thrown down, with the governor's office fully engaged, trying to make something happen, and with all that goodwill and good intention, look how that's working out for us. No editorial comment needed, just sometimes you have to do those things. This is not one of those times. There is no hue and cry except from people sitting behind me who want to put up solar panels and make a living doing that. There's no hue and cry to do that this year. This committee that you chair, Madam Chair, is a good committee with good people on it that can take the time to drill down into this so that 40 pages can be done on this tabletop and not between now and the floor. And we all know how we feel about committee work on the floor, and there will be committee work on the floor on this bill again. Mr. Chair, I do have another question for the testifier.
Mr. Chair, if I could just respond to that.
Certainly.
The 40 pages that I got was from Excel on Sunday evening. The 10-day hiatus was definitely not my preferred method of negotiating. There was just a little break for reasons outside of my control. And Representative Beard, I expect there'll be a very robust conference committee process where we look at the version that the Senate has and the version that the House has, and there will be public testimony. And like in all the other conference committees where there are significant differences, those differences will be worked out in conference in open committee process with people moving different versions of language and people providing testimony to help us make sure we don't make mistakes.
Representative Beard.
Mr. Chair, I trust that that's true, but I will remind the members that I am a member of the House of Representatives, and I'm sworn to do my best in this committee and in this body, and I'm probably not going to be on the conference committee. And you know, Madam Chair, that I enjoy input into this process because this is such a foundational issue to the industrial society we live in. And I don't take this matter lightly, as you can tell. But, Mr. Chair, while I have Mr. Evans sitting there, I'm going to redirect just a little bit, and I'm going to ask him a question about some of the conflicting language, and I hope this is in the 40-page memo that you advanced to the chair of the committee, Mr. Evans. But on line 10.18, there's a notwithstanding provision. And I'm not a lawyer, and as I've told you before, I never even played one in a high school play once. But that means something. And I'd see that that has to do with the price we pay people involved in the... Now, this is in the DE4 amendment. I'm referring to the DE4 amendment. There's a notwithstanding provision in paragraph beginning on 10.18. Regarding the same stuff, net metered people who want to go on and sell power back over on 11.27, there's another notwithstanding provision. Now, to my casual eye, those appear to be in conflict with what price we're going to pay people that opt to become distributed generators.
Which was the second one?
We deleted it from the 8, so we haven't acted on it, really. Everybody said delete that.
Because it looks like, Mr. Evans, if I know you're studying there, look up when you're ready to hear more.
Mr. Chair, Representative Beard,
Mr. Evans.
the author tells me that she's deleting that section under 11.2 that starts on line 11.27.
Also, that might, Mr. Chair, that might take care of that big problem.
Mr. Chair and Representative Beard, there was a magical moment once the DE4 was posted that the munis and the co-ops and Excel and Representative Andrew Falk all asked me to delete Section 11. So I, in the 829 amendment, deleted Section 11. That does leave open the issue of how we are going to compensate people who install systems that are larger than 40 kilowatt capacity and up to 1 megawatt capacity. And that is a conversation that is very tightly linked with how we handle the value of solar tariff and the buy all, sell all. And is my understanding that the utilities position is they would like avoided cost. And Representative Falk's position is that that's not appropriate compensation for people who install small generation. And Representative Falk would contend that that's not consistent with the 1978 federal law PURPA.
Okay.
Representative Beard.
Well, thank you. Well, Mr. Chair, the committee learned something here this morning, and this is what good committee work is. We've touched on a couple things, Mr. Chair. When we make this happen and we've increased this to 1 megawatt in size. Maybe some of the others would like to speak to this too, but over the years I've become aware that there is sort of an underlying doctrine or principle that we operate in our guaranteed service territories, and that's who gets to generate what, where, when. Who gets to own the generation, who gets to service the territories and so on. It seems to me that by raising this to a megawatt and by opening it up to pretty much anybody, we're starting to attack that foundation that a lot of the rate structure and a lot of what the PUC does is built on. Any comment on what we're trying to do here? Because we're talking about a century of experience, again, with a $10 billion industry that our entire economy is built on. And you can understand why I'm just a little cautious and skeptical about how fast we're moving when I think this is what's happening here. And perhaps I'm mistaken, but...
Was that placed to the author?
Well, I'm looking at the author, but I think the IOU can certainly speak to it, because I actually sat in a meeting with high-priced lawyers one day and listened to them negotiate in language I didn't even understand over a 22-megawatt facility in Shakopee, and where the boundaries were and what legal terms were going to be used to protect the integrity of who gets to own the distribution and who gets to be called a public utility. That is a very big deal, and that's as much as I know about it, and I'm cautious that we're wading into that territory without knowing what we're doing.
Okay, Representative Hortman.
Mr. Chair and members, that was definitely, Representative Beard has pretty much encapsulated the policy debates we had in the Energy Committee when we heard Representative Falk's House File 1170, 1174, when we heard House Files 773, 880, and 956. And this is just a topic on which Representative Beard and I have a fundamental disagreement, and the vote out of the committee to move the bill forward was that we are interested in more distributed generation. There's two schools of thought on this. You know, we have our utilities are regulated monopolies. We protect their ability to get a reasonable rate of return. We protect their market share. We don't allow competition. And there's another school of thought that, you know, technology is changing. We used to have the baby bells that were the monopoly for telephone service, for fixed line service. And over time, as technology changed and competitors entered the marketplace, we determined we could relieve consumers of being subject to that monopoly to some small degree, step by step, and eventually the monopoly went away. I don't think this monopoly is going away. The policy issues we grappled with in the Energy Policy Committee all session were, what's the right balance between protecting the monopoly and allowing some aspects of competition? I'll just, remind you, for the purposes of the broader context, this bill is talking about, at maximum, a 4% slice of power generation. We're not talking about changing the entire way that the utilities do business. We're talking about, if the bill were to pass as written right now, 4% of their power supply, and addressing that.
I would like, Mr. Chair, I'd like to hear the IOU and speak to it if he wishes to, and can add any more to the idea or the thought.
Mr. Chair,
Evans.
The fundamental change that we're making here, I agree with Representative Hortman. This is a change in technology. This is the ability for people to put solar generation and other kinds of generation on their own property to generate their own energy. But those people, as I mentioned before, are still reliant on the utility system to provide all the rest of their energy. And none of that stuff gets any cheaper because they're producing some of their own energy. And none of it goes away because they're producing some of their own energy. And if they're not going to pay for it, then their neighbors are. And what this really is about is a brand new thing that we've not done before, and that is put generation on our distribution grid. The way the utilities have operated up until now is we have central generation, we run it along transmission lines to substations, and we distribute it on a separate grid, the distribution grid, to our businesses and homes. It was not designed to put generation on the distribution grid. The energy on the distribution grid runs one way, from the substation to the homes. Now we're introducing a new concept. And just keep in mind, this is not a reason not to do it, but it's a reason to do it carefully. We're introducing a new concept where some customers are going to be able, because of their the amount of rooftop they have, the kind of home they live in, the kind of yard they have, what have you, or how much money they have, frankly, are going to be able to start generating their own electricity. And it's going to cause a shift of costs to everyone who can't afford to do that, or who doesn't own a rooftop, or who doesn't own a yard, or who doesn't have a place to put a gas generator. And so the concern here is not that we shouldn't change the utility structure, but that we should do it carefully, and that we should make sure we have the rules right so that it's fair. In this situation, just another example of this, if you live in the part of Burnsville that XL Energy serves, you will get the benefit of this new technology. If you live in the part of Burnsville that's served by a co-op, you won't. So neighbors to neighbors across the street from each other are going to be operating under different systems with different cost structures and different abilities to do different things. And it creates a fundamental unfairness within the structure that we have. None of this is unfixable. The buy-all, sell-all program that Representative Hortman referenced was one of the proposals that we brought forward as a way to fix this. But under this bill, we don't get to choose that. The customer gets to choose that. Well, of course, the customer is going to choose the method that is the most beneficial to them, the method that allows them to use more resources without paying for them, because why wouldn't they? And so it's just another problem with the bill. When you're trying to restructure this, I get it, we're trying to restructure the utility industry. But we're trying to restructure the utility industry without fixing the rules so that it's fair to everyone, so that everyone can participate in the same way, and so that the costs are distributed to people in the way that they're using the system. And this bill just doesn't do that, and it's a fundamental problem with the bill. The other thing I'll mention is, though it's a small, you might say 4% doesn't sound like much. 4% is actually quite a lot. But the other part of this bill would have us spend 1 1/3% of our retail sales each year, which in our case would be about $40 million, providing subsidies to people to put the solar up on their rooftop. Solar on the rooftop, by the way, is the most expensive way to make energy that we know. And now we're going to spend $40 million of our money under this bill to subsidize people to put this up, when we haven't got the rules right, so that their neighbors who aren't putting one up are going to have to pick up even more of the tab, not only help pay for the subsidy through their rates, but also pay for the infrastructure through their rates. And it's a fundamental problem. We have no problem with changing the utility business. We get it, it's going to change. We get it that people want solar panels on their roofs, and we get it that solar energy might be the wave of the future. But you can't change that part of it and not change the fundamental rules that govern how the utilities, which are highly regulated, how those costs are passed through to our customers.
I've got a question, Mr. Evans. When you say this has never been done before, I was quite involved with Buffalo Ridge, wind energy. The arguments I've just heard were arguments that were used at that point in time. And a couple of years later, huge spread in the Tribune about how, I think it was still called NSP at that point, endorsed it, liked it. It had been a legislative mandate, resisted by NSP at the time, but a complete and total endorsement. But that is energy that is being produced, and it was being put on the grid by wind. Arguments seem to be the same. I was just trying to think. I used to serve on LCCMR, and it was either LCCMR or Capital Investment Committee, one or the other. We visited a farm in central Minnesota, and that was biomass. And that farm produced electricity for their own use, and then the excess electricity that they were producing, they were selling to the local power company. I don't know if it was a co-op or one of the investor-owned utilities, but they were selling it onto the grid. So I'm having trouble with your argument that this has never been done before. I'm not saying that you may have some challenges, but please don't say it's never been done before when, in fact, alternative forms of energy have been used before. You and I both know that. I don't know if you lobbied for NSP at the time, but I happened to be one of the conferees at the time, along with Representative Hausman. I don't see her here right now, but there's still two of us, at least on this committee, that were quite involved with that issue. Representative
Mr. Chair.
Beard.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you were directing that to me, but
I was making comments. If you want to respond, you can. That's fine.
Well, Mr. Chair, I appreciate what you say. There's a couple of pretty important differences, I guess I would point out. First of all, we were given a wind mandate, and you're right, it was resisted by the utilities at the time because we thought it was too expensive, and the decision of the legislature was it was not too expensive to get started. But we were given a wind mandate and told to go do it in the most cost-effective way that we could. And so the wind came onto the system just like any other power plant, out in the prairie, connected to the transmission line, transmitted to a substation, and distributed to our customers. This is quite a bit different. If all you were asking us to do was go out and put solar panels in the prairie and bring the energy in on transmission lines and distribute it to our customers, I would say that the comparison was apt, though I would say the solar is still quite a bit more expensive than wind was back at the time we introduced wind. But I may be wrong about that. I'd have to go back and look. But the point is, this is quite a bit different from that. This is putting solar into neighborhoods, on people's homes, on the distribution grid, affecting their consumption of energy in a way that upsets the way we have always distributed costs among our customers. The other thing I would point out is that we are in a much different position as a utility industry today than we were back in those days. Back in those days, we used to see consistent growth in demand for our energy. Today, we are in a period where we see flat growth. We are not growing. We, as you know, file resource plans and look out 15 years. We don't have a need for any kind of new energy in our system until 2018. Under this bill, we would add 120 megawatts of solar by 2016, 2 years before our resource plan says we even need any energy. And so it's a different universe that we're talking about here. And I just want to emphasize, from Xcel's point of view, that is not a reason not to start the solar experiment today, but it's a reason to do it carefully and to make sure that we have the rules right before we start off on this very complicated, much more complicated than the wind problem.
Mr. Chair.
And, Mr. Evans, my only point was that your comments, we could have substituted the word wind for solar. The arguments were virtually identical, including the cost argument. Representative Beard, did you have a...
Yes, I do. Mr. Chair, thank you.
Mr. Chair, before we move on, I just want to very briefly address the cost issue that was raised. The number $40 million was raised.
Representative Hortman.
And I do want Xcel to spend $40 million a year on small rooftop solar. In their last rate increase, though, they asked for $81 million to upgrade Monticello. They asked for $89 million to upgrade other core plant substations, poles, and wires. They asked for $40 million for just property taxes. And they asked for $75 million because customers are more efficient than they used to be and there's not load growth. And they asked for a 10.7% increase, $285 million, on a rate base of $26.6 billion per year. So out of $26.6 billion that Xcel ratepayers are paying to Xcel, yes, I would like them to spend $40 million on solar. And that's a pretty small percentage. And then to the point of this is a new thing, we don't know how it's going to impact the system. We are doing it in this country. New Jersey, Governor Chris Christie upped their 2% by 2020 mandate to 4% by 2028. They have reached 1 gigawatt of solar power. It's distributed generation. It's on their system. They are doing it. Why does New Jersey have 1 gigawatt of solar power and Minnesota has 13 megawatts? They have a policy. They have 5,000 jobs that have been created by that policy, and they're doing it. We know it works. We know in Colorado, Xcel is doing it, and we know they're on track to meet their standard in Colorado of 3% distributed generation by 2020.
Mr. Chair, I wonder if I could just make a brief comment.
We're going to entertain questions of you, I think is what
I appreciate that.
the process is going to be. And we do have other people on the list. Representative Beard.
Well, then I'll ask one more if there are other people that would like to jump in as well, Mr. Chair. But there used to be a philosophy at PUC for a century that we always look for the least cost resource. And we've turned that on its head here in the last decade, even under the previous governor, my friend, who had some notions. And I will point out before I get to my question that the industry represented in this room is among the best in the country. They'll stand on their head in a corner and spin plates and make electricity if that's what we order them to do, because they have engineers and they have people that know this business, and they are the best at it. So it doesn't matter what we tell them to do, they can conform. But they also have an interest in their customers. And that's going to get to my question here in a moment, because you've split my town in half with this amendment, Representative Hortman. They can make it work, but they are also concerned about their customers, because when we talk about $40 million spread over an XL rate base, that's no big deal to my $100 a month electric bill. That's another $4. Big deal. But if it's 4%, and we're talking there, but if we're talking about an electrically run steel mill on the Mississippi River, we're talking about a refinery, and I know some of you don't like refineries, but they're a way of life. So let's talk about food processing. The average Target store, $24,000 a month is their electric bill. You bump their rates, you're talking about an employee out of the back room who has to take a walk because they've got to pay the bill somehow. Steel mills, over $1 million a month in electric costs. This is where it really gets to be a big deal. And what we've done now with the amendment, apparently, if it's adopted here, is we split Shakopee right down 4th Avenue. Because all the heavy industry, the shingle plant, the lumber plant, the cardboard plant, the glass plant that burns the silica sand or uses that, the Valley Fair, all that stuff is all an XL customer. And that's the one that's going to be impacted by this. But just across the street at the coffee roasting place, the pillow factory, the print shop, they're all going to be on Shakopee Public Utilities and have a lower rate and have less impact from this. So if we started, say, pulling service lines across 4th Avenue to help the box plant or the shingle plant, Mr. Evans, do you think XL would have something to say about that?
Mr. Evans.
Mr. Chair, I guess I don't remember which side of the road the box plant or the shingle plant were on. But
the box plant is yours. The shingle plant is your service territory. The other side is Shakopee Public Utilities, which has been carefully carved out of this because apparently it's not good enough for the public utilities, the small town munis we call them. But it is okay for you and for the big guys down along the railroad tracks who make big stuff and pay big wages.
Oh, Mr. Chair, Representative Beard, the exclusive service territory is pretty important to the regulatory scheme. So if the idea is that those businesses on the XL side of the street would apply to become members of the Shakopee Public Utility, that is a concern of ours. It's a concern of ours in the whole bill because, the state is not exactly divided up. We have, I think, over 150 towns smaller than 5,000 people in our service territory. We serve Mankato, which would be covered by this bill. We don't serve Rochester, which would not be covered by this bill. And so we do have a concern. A lot of times people will say, well, you're a utility, you get to recover all your costs anyway, what do you care? And, I can see there's a certain point to that. But as we start losing customers to move to territories either outside of the state of Minnesota or now within the state of Minnesota where they can enjoy lower energy bills because mandates are applied to one area but not to another area, like across the street in Shakopee, we start losing our industrial customers and our small business customers, and essentially our system starts to load down on the residential customers.
Okay,
enough for now.
Representative Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Representative Hortman, I appreciate you handing out this map and you talking a little bit about New Jersey. Can you tell me what are the rates per kilowatt hour in New Jersey right now?
Representative Hortman.
Mr. Chair, Representative Anderson, I believe they are somewhere between 12 and 15. I think they may be 14 right now. Mr. Evans may have a better idea about that.
Mr. Evans?
I don't know. I think Representative Hortman's about right that they're higher than they are here. I think it's important to note that in New Jersey, what utilities are permitted to do with their solar standard is any subsidy or amount that they pay for solar energy, they're allowed to build into their rate base and earn their rate of return on. That is boy, you want to let us do that? We're the solar utility. It is a completely different regulatory scheme than what we have here in Minnesota. If we could build the solar resources into our rate base and earn our rate of return on the solar resources like they do in New Jersey, maybe we'd catch up.
Mr. Chair and Mr. Evans, can you tell me what is Minnesota's rate right now? per kilowatt hour, ballpark
Evans?
figure.
Mr. Chair, I'm not, the rates are going to be different all across the board. I mean, our rates are, I want to say something like help me out, Bill. About 9 cents. I was going to say 10, so thank you. Say
So
penny.
we're looking at potentially putting a 50% increase then on homeowners and businesses across the state when it comes to utility rates here in the state of Minnesota. And, we've talked about this a little bit. Representative Beard has pointed it out that we could potentially have neighbors across the street paying one cost structure versus the others. And I happen to have a communities that is split as well. And my biggest concern with this bill, Representative Hortman, is at a time when families can least afford it, we're going to be increasing, in addition, on top of all the tax increases you guys have got going on here, we're also going to be hitting them on their electric rates. And a 50% increase, that's a chunk of change for folks.
I think we're hearing a
And
little
I'm just
fuzzy
a little-
math here, Representative Anderson.
I'm just a little concerned about what that means.
This is,
So-
the mandate would be 2% across the, or is it 4% across
By
the,
2025, it's 4%.
across the whole system?
Well, Mr.
That's not for all
Chair.
utility payers, that kind of an increase.
But if we look at an example where we have New Jersey that has gone to a 4.1% solar energy mandate by 2028, and they're paying a rate of 14 cents per kilowatt hour, it doesn't take much to assume that Minnesota at 9 cents per kilowatt hour probably going to go up to that 14 cents in order to, who knows what is going to happen for us. And I think that we all need to walk into this bill with eyes wide open, knowing the impact that this is going to have on the ratepayers of the state of Minnesota. Whether that is the homeowners, whether that is renters, whether that is businesses, we need to consider what that impact will be. And, as we talked about the solar energy piece of this, in particular in who's going to be able to put these solar energy panels up on their roofs, I happen to live in a townhome. And we have bylaws against putting anything on our roof without the approval of our townhome association. And there's a lot of townhomes in the area that I represent, and none of those folks are going to be able to access this under the bill as it stands. So, those are some of my concerns. I appreciate that Representative Hortman is working on this issue, but I think there's a lot more work that needs to be done.
Just a quick comment, Representative Anderson. I've followed energy issues for over 20 years. We have one of the lowest rates in the United States. My point is that New Jersey, in all likelihood, and I haven't looked at them specifically, we're probably a whole lot higher going into the solar mandate than Minnesota is currently going into the solar mandate. I think there's a fundamental difference there when we start comparing rates. But Representative Hortman, you look like you wanted to respond to that particular question. Representative Hortman.
Well, Mr. Chair, Representative Anderson, the 50% increase is kind of an outlandish figure and not able to be substantiated by any of the data that we have. Geronimo Energy contributed to a handout that's in your packets that predicts that the net impact for the average homeowner would be 22 cents a month. Just to put that in perspective, Excel's last rate increase request was 10.7%, and as I indicated before, $89 million was an upgrade in substations, poles, wires, transmission lines. That's one of the benefits of solar, is that it decreases our need for capital like that. So there is a balance. Yes, it's more expensive to install this capital up front, but it does decrease costs in other ways. For one thing, that we know what the price of solar energy will be 30 years from now. We don't know what the price of natural gas will be. We don't know what the price of coal will be. And we also know that it does put the generation where the peak load is, and it's an especially good match for summer peaking. So right now, Excel has a proposal at the PUC to build 3 new natural gas peaking plants that would be operational in 2016. At the very same Public Utilities Commission, we have a solar company that's offered to build 100 megawatts of solar power to meet part of that peaking demand. And so, as policymakers, we have to make a choice. Do we want all of the peaking demand that we're looking at in 2016 to be met by 3 new natural gas peaking plants, 2 of which I believe would be built and operated in North Dakota? Or do we want some of that peaking load to be generated here in Minnesota and paid for here in Minnesota. And I think we want a diverse portfolio. Just like in our 401ks, we would never put 30% of our money in each of 3 stocks. We would spread it out. And I'm saying, let's not put 30% of our energy portfolio into solar. Let's not even put 10%. Let's put 0.5% by 2016 and 2% by 2020. And I see that as a hedge against really unpredictable natural gas prices.
Well, Mr. Chair and Representative Hortman, my concern here is that we haven't talked about truly what is the impact going to be on the ratepayers of the state of Minnesota. And the argument that Minnesota has the lowest rates and then that somehow we're not paying our fair share and that we need to pay more is a little disconcerting, given the economy that we have in our state right now.
Okay, Representative McNamara.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Representative Hortman, I'm trying to grasp the magnitude of these changes here in this committee, and I'm dumbfounded. And Representative Beard, you're not the only one whose town's divided in half. Unfortunately, Hastings, it's not a straight line. It's the old municipal line from when I was a kid. And now I have Dakota Electric. I look out the window and see my Hastings Regina Hospital. They have Excel. Most of our business is in the older part of town, but now a lot of the shopping centers are in the newer part, and they're Dakota Electric. So we have some real complications here. So it just so happens that myself and both my sons live in Dakota Electric, even though I think we only have about 30 or 40% of the town. And unfortunately, the older part of town is all Excel, so those are the people that are going to pay higher electricity than the people living in the new part. So I'm really trying to understand this. But where I'm really troubled, recently, Representative Hortman, 2 of the great things going on near my community were both the refineries had huge turnarounds. My grandchildren's other grandfather had to work. Some people would say had to, but he got to work, got 12-hour days every day of the week in a row. He's a supervisor pipe fitter and was getting huge checks and having lots of withholdings taken out at one of the refineries. And the other refinery had their biggest turnover ever and had to use an abandoned building's parking lot for all the overflow parking. Just terrific news. Every day of the week, day and night, they were working. Flint Hills happens to be on the very edge of the service area of Xcel Energy. I remember when I toured the power plant in Red Wing, they actually consume the equivalent of 15% of the power plant in Red Wing at the power plant at Prairie Island. Representative Hortman, what's the implications if Flint Hills expands to the south and begins to use power from Dakota Electric instead of Xcel? And I'm just curious, how does all that fit, and what's the implications for the residents in the area? And what actually are the implications for someone like Flint Hills, which just passes it on, those increased costs to consumers? How does all this fit together? I'm really trying to understand. This has huge implications for my district and my neighborhood.
Mr. Chair, Representative McNamara, my understanding is that Dakota Cooperative rates are higher, and that actually the membership of Dakota Cooperative is the only cooperative in the state that has elected amongst the membership to be rate regulated by the PUC in an attempt to bring down their rates. So I don't think it's likely that Flint Hills would be switching from an IOU that has a very large economy of scale to offer to Dakota Electric Cooperative. The other thing I would say is some of the larger cooperatives, like Rochester Public Utilities, has their own solar plan. So they're not included in this state policy, but they're doing that on their own. They're already moving forward, and other munis and co-ops have indicated a desire to do that on their own. So I think it will be throughout the state at different rates. The other thing I would say is that Flint Hills, if they're 15% of the power draw in Red Wing, did you say? They are most at risk for a radical change in the price of natural gas. You know, in the 1970s, the federal government passed a law that said you can't burn natural gas to create electricity because there's not enough of it. And so all of a sudden, people were in a pinch. And I don't know if that's the beginning of when people started looking at alternative energy, because I was in elementary school then. But my presumption it would be that would be right in line with when the country started looking at renewable sources, is when we had a very, very tight natural gas supply. Now, of course, none of us know what's going to happen in the natural gas market. I'm sure entities like GRE would have loved to have known when natural gas prices were going to fall, and they wish they wouldn't have entered into some contracts that they did. I think that having 0.5% solar by 2016 and 2% by 2020 is a nice hedge against potentially large natural gas price spikes that throughout history have been completely unpredictable.
Mr. Chair, thank you, Mr. Chair, and Representative Hortman. I'm going to have to ask both Dakota Electric and XL to come down, because actually I've always heard that Dakota Electric, maybe things have changed with all the things we've done over the last 4 or 5 years with energy have changed it. But Dakota Electric always used to have cheaper electricity rates than XL. And that was an advantage to us. And I'm wondering if they could speak to that, because my understanding is with these new mandates, this is going to change all that. And I'm trying to understand that.
Okay, the clock is ticking, so if you can be as brief as possible.
Absolutely, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, members, my name is Stacy Fucci. I work with Great River Energy. Great River Energy is the generation and transmission cooperative who Dakota Electric is one of our 28 members. Dakota Electric is not here today, so I can tell you that their rates are competitive. I can't tell you the exact amount. Obviously, they would have a better idea than I do, but they are competitive with XL Territory.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Ms. Fuji, so you're going to be exempt in this situation, so you won't have increased costs. You're competitive today. And I'll ask XL, I believe their rates are going to be increased with this bill. And so they would become less competitive. You would become more competitive. And is it true that your territory is adjacent to the Flint Hills refinery in I believe you actually, or you're not you, but the refinery actually occupies part of Inver Grove Heights and part of Rosemont. I know you serve Rosemont, but I don't believe you serve any in Inver Grove. You actually may serve a little bit. Are you right to the south of the existing refinery?
Mr. Chair, Representative McNamara, I am not exactly sure how far Dakota Electric Association service territory runs, so I'm not sure how far.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, if I could ask Mr. Evans, I'm curious, what will the implications be with this mandate on that, and how will that work competitively? I would imagine you like Flint Hills. I can't imagine how fast the meter spins. I heard once what the RFD costs are for them, but I'm just trying to understand. If today you're competitive with them, what will it be tomorrow?
Mr. Evans.
Mr. Chair, someone may correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe at one point Flint Hills did reach an agreement with us and opted to be served by Dakota Electric some years ago because they are right on the border. They then later changed their mind and decided to switch back. But the fact is that I think the rates are very competitive, but it is a concern of ours. I mean, just to look at if we have to spend 1 1/3% of our retail sales on subsidies for people to put rooftop solar up, that's 1.3% right there. So we'll start with that, which again doesn't seem like much, but I think as Representative Beard pointed out, when you buy electricity by the truckload the way they do, it does start to add up, and it is a concern with us that our industrial customers and commercial customers will be able to pick and choose. I can't tell you exactly what the impact will be because we don't know what the price is going to be and all of that, but obviously we're buying some of the most expensive energy that there is to buy, and it will have a rate impact, and at some point our customers or people who might think of moving into our service territory are going to have to make decisions based on that.
Well, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Evans, and I'll try and wrap up. Representative Hortman, I really think it's too bad that you're not bringing this to your committee tonight. I don't understand why you don't schedule a hearing and discuss this. Just the implications in my district and the interaction between Dakota Electric and XL and how it affects a place like Flint Hills or other areas is really serious. And all of a sudden now we're exempting Dakota Electric, which the people in Hastings don't know. Some the power comes from the one direction, some the other. They don't understand that, but we're going to increase the cost on, truthfully, in my community, where a lot of the businesses and lower income people live, and the people with the new homes, the bigger houses, I'm assuming they have more money. They're going to be exempt from this, and I don't know that that's been fully discussed, the implications in your committee, and we have 3 more weeks here, 3 weeks from yesterday. This should be discussed in committee. This is a big, big change, and it's a shame that we have an energy committee and we're doing this policy here, Mr. Chair. I really think it's unfortunate. You just heard them. They don't know their exact implications on this one really important business. They provide the gasoline we put in our cars, which we're using less of today as the cars go more. But there's huge implications for consumers here, and I don't believe they've been fully discussed.
There's I'm going to recognize Representative Hillstrom and Representative Beard. I think we've had a fair amount of discussion, and then the author of the bill for some concluding comments, and then I think we're going to vote. Representative Hillstrom.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Actually, 8 minutes ago, I think, or 10 minutes ago, it was just posted on the web that Xcel Energy profit shares rose 26% in the first quarter of 2013. It also said, the article also goes on to say that they've had very large gains in profits. Those gains were partly offset by higher operating and maintenance expenses and depreciation, but the first quarter revenues were $2.78 billion, up 8% compared with a year ago. Members, I think that a solar standard is appropriate. I do know that Representative Hortman has been working very hard on this issue and will continue to work on this issue to try to alleviate as many concerns as possible. But members, I think that this is the right thing to do and urge your support.
And Representative Beard, are you the lead on the Energy Committee?
I wish I was, but no,
okay.
I'm not.
Yeah, me too.
I've been on all
But
10
you
years
seem
I've been
to be,
here.
if you don't mind making the concluding comments
Yes.
from your point of view then, and then we'll have Representative Hillstrom or
Mr. Chair.
Representative Hortman, and then we'll vote.
I have
Representative
just a
Beard.
couple concluding remarks. I do have one question for my friends from Minnesota Power. If I could just ask them to comment briefly about what the steel mines are going to react to. And I'll try to keep that to just under a couple minutes, and then I have a couple concluding comments, if I may. And while the witness is coming, Mr. Chairman, we've seen a profound shift here in the last decade, one that concerns me a great deal because I do have some background in electricity. We've always looked at electricity as a commodity. It's a raw input into the processes that we do to do other useful things. Electricity has never been an end unto itself until lately. But one of the things that concerns me is our friends on the Iron Range, where a great deal of wealth is produced for this state. Raw materials pried out of the ground, processed and shipped all over the world that brings revenue back here because we've had reliable, dependable, high-quality baseload electric power. And now we're talking about some more supplemental forms of power, particularly solar. At least it's predictable, you know when it won't be working. But, Mr. Chair, for our friends from Minnesota Power, have you folks vetted this? Do you have any idea what the cost will be? And I'm not worried about your company. I really don't care about Xcel's company or your company, but I care very much about your customers that employ people that we represent. Mr. Chair, that would be my question for the witness.
And I'm curious, are you Minnesota Power or Elite?
I'm with Minnesota Power. We're a subsidiary of Elite.
Oh, okay.
Chair.
Those terms seem to be interchangeable. Okay, Minnesota Power then. All right.
Okay. Thank you, Chair Carlson. My name is Margaret Hodnick, and I'm the Vice President of Regulatory and Legislative Affairs for Minnesota Power. And in response to Representative Beard's question, our large power customers, our industrial customers, are very concerned about the solar standard. We have mining, taconite, and paper mills. They represent about 60% of our load. They employ thousands of people in our service territory. And we project the solar standard would raise our rates by somewhere in the neighborhood of 10%, 10 to 15%, somewhere in there, depending on how much we were required to add. And that's in relation to wind energy. If we were adding wind energy, that 10% increase would be above that. So I'm comparing a renewable to a renewable when I use that figure.
And Representative Beard, your concluding
Thank you.
comments?
Yes, so thank you for those comments. Mr. Chair, I just wanted, because we get so urban-centric sometimes, we think the world revolves inside the 494 Beltway, and it doesn't. There's a lot of stuff going on all over this great state of ours, and not the least of which would be our friends on the Iron Range. who use copious amounts of electricity. They have mines up there that use the total output of some of their power producers. She spoke about the difference between wind and solar. And again, one of the things we've got with the wind mandate, as much as we squabbled about that, is that we just said go build it. And it's backed up by natural gas. And thank goodness, members, that it is, because natural gas is driving down the price of wind. If natural gas goes back up, if it ever does, wind will go up. It follows natural gas. This solar mandate that we're discussing here, and we didn't even get to probably the most important part of the bill, and that's the value of solar and the rates that they were ordered or will be ordered to pay on top of the value of solar, excuse me, and we put them in statute. Now, we've had discussions here before, well, at least we have in the Energy Committee, and we have in this committee, about the foolishness of putting rates in law. We actually put them in those books right behind you there, Mr. Chair. We have a bill that Representative Moline has that I'm supporting because it needs to happen, but we actually set the rates that we order Xcel Energy to pay for power coming off the Iron Range and a little biomass plant that heats their town. Rather than just say, you guys go work it out, get your best deal, and pass it on to the customers, we're actually setting it in law. Mr. Chairman, that is one of the hugest, biggest differences I can see between the wind mandate and the solar mandate, is we're actually setting the rates in law and telling them how much they're going to buy. Once again, Mr. Chairman, for a century, we've looked at electricity as a commodity that we do useful things with. It helps us multiply our muscles, our speed, our time, our capacity, and we're turning it into a boutique fuel at the expense of the people who actually produce wealth in this state. I'm sorry that this bill hasn't had another couple years to be vetted like the wind stuff did. It's moving through here at warp speed. Heaven help us. I feel sorry for the people that are looking at a 4% mandate now, because this is how this happened before. A 10% suggestion turned into a 10% standard, then became the goal. And, oh, by the way, then we got into one-upmanship between the previous governor and the green environmentalists. 10 by 10, 20 by 20, no, it's 25 by 25, except for Xcel. I'll remind you, it's 30 by 20. 30 by 20 for Xcel members. And we're only, 7 years away from that number. Beyond that, this is a 4% standard now, but it says in the bill that 10% is where we would like to get to. We've already been warned that we're heading for 10. We didn't even talk about the other little thing that snuck in the bill. The 30 by 20 is going to 40. 40% renewables will be the new goal if the bill passes. Unless it's in one of the amendments that I missed, we might have changed that. But, Mr. Chairman, there is so much in this bill that an energy geek like me would love to just sit down and chew the fat on, and I think a lot of people that actually use electricity to move this state forward and pay the wages and the taxes we've all grown accustomed to would like to weigh in on. Again, members, this is not about Xcel, it's not about Minnesota Power, it's not about Otter Tail. This is about the people who actually pay the rates. Thank you. That concludes my comments.
Okay, Representative Hortman, and then we'll vote.
Mr. Chair, members, I'd appreciate your support for the bill.
Okay, Representative Atkins renews his motion that the DE4 amendment be recommended to pass. Any further discussion?
Mr. Chair, this is just to put the DE amendment on the bill.
That's
and then
right.
We're going to do the other two amendments.
But it pretty much becomes the bill as a result, although there are 3 additional amendments. Okay, any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Motion carried. We now have the A28 amendment. Representative Atkins.
Mr. Chairman, I'll move the A28.
Okay, the amendment is before us. This is on behalf of the author, Representative Hortman. Pardon? Oh, we need to do this one next. This is the A30. Oh, okay. Excuse me. We need to withdraw that motion, and we need to do the A30 amendment.
So moved.
Okay, that motion is before us. Representative Hortman. That's your amendment. It's an amendment to the amendment.
Yes, Mr. Chair. I don't know which order you want to do it in. The A30 amends the A28. Both the A28 and the A30 are purely technical fiscal language changes recommended by either Commerce, PUC, or fiscal staff of the House, nonpartisan.
Okay, everybody have that amendment then? Any discussion?
Well, Mr. Chair, you withdrew the A28. You need to reoffer the A28.
He did reoffer it. I thought he did. No?
Nah. Let me try once more.
Okay.
I think I got it down. So I'm going to offer the A28, and then we'll offer the A30 to the A28.
So we are back offering the 828.
Yep.
That was the original until, okay. The A28 amendment is before us. Representative Atkins so moves. Representative Hortman, the A28 amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I would just simply request Representative Atkins to move the A30 to the A28. I believe you'd want to, I don't know if you want to amend the A. You can do it in either order, right?
Mr. Chairman, that's what I did. I moved the
We are now voting
A30
on
to the A28.
Okay, okay, the A30 amendment is before us. Any discussion on the A30? Seeing none, then all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, motion carried. Now we have the A28 amendment before us as amended. Okay, Representative Hortman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is the fiscal amendment. I would ask for member support. What it does, the way that the fiscal issues work in the energy area is the PUC and the Department of Commerce assess their costs on the utility, and then we allow them appropriation authority to spend those assessments. So the net impact on the general fund is zero.
Okay, any discussion? Representative Beard.
Mr. Chair, I'm looking on line 116 of the 828 amendment, though, and it says it specifically it's appropriated from the general fund to the commissioner. Did we just alter that with the A30 amendment? Trying to come up to speed here on this.
Mr. Chair, Representative Beard, the Department of Commerce and the PUC deposit their assessment into the general fund, and then it's appropriated back to them.
I understand.
Okay, any further discussion? Seeing none, then all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, motion carried. Now we have 29. Yeah. Representative Atkins, the A29 amendment.
I'll move the A29, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, the A29 amendment is moved. Representative Hortman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. These were additional changes requested by the munis and the co-ops after they saw the DE4, and after I saw the DE4 and the things we still needed to do to meet their concerns.
Okay, any discussion? Seeing none, then all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed?
No.
Carried.
Mr. Chair, we'd like a roll call on the final passage.
Okay. Representative Atkins renews his motion then that House File 956, the second engrossment, as amended, be recommended to pass and placed in the general register. Any discussion? And a roll call has been requested. Seeing none, then clerk will take the roll.
Carlson?
Aye.
Abler? Excused. Anderson?
No.
Ansel?
No.
Atkins?
Aye.
Beard?
No.
Reinhardt?
Yes.
Clark excused. Davids?
No.
Dabney?
Aye.
Dean?
Nope.
Detmer?
No.
Gunther?
No.
Hackbarth?
No.
Hausman?
Yes.
Hillstrom?
Yes.
Holberg?
No.
Hornstein?
Yes.
Huntley excused. Khan?
Aye.
Vincheski excused.
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Aye.
Loon? Excused. Mahoney?
Aye.
Mariani?
Yes.
Marquardt?
Yes.
McNamara?
No.
Mullery? Nornis?
No.
Paymar?
Aye.
Pulowski? Poppy?
No.
Simon?
Yes.
Wagenius?
Yes.
Woodard?
No.
Okay, there were 15 ayes and 13 nays, so the motion prevails. And we will be in recess then until immediately after session, at which time we'll be taking up the unionization of daycare facilities.
Mr. Chair, we've received a number of phone calls from people that want to attend the hearing this afternoon. Are you willing to post a no earlier than time, or to give some guidance as to when people should start,
Willing to post when?
like a not earlier than time. I mean, I know it's always guesstimating how long.
Magic save folder? Sure, and as soon as we get some feel for that, we'll post approximately.
Or maybe at the very least allowing at least a half hour after session ends instead of immediate. I mean, there's the public.
As a practical matter, that would we'll post it.
I mean, I just think that in order to give a fair shot, not have people sit down here waiting from noon on that have no clue how long it's gonna take. Or
It's 9:20 in the morning. Nobody's giving me crap.
It takes that long.
Right, but if you would post a not earlier than time, no earlier than 2 or no earlier than 3, then people could come back and look.
We're having some difficulties. I had no idea.
Yeah. Nice.
Right, but there's 8 bills on the calendar.
But you knew you had it?
1 half hour after we,
Which one?
after we adjourn. Because I have no idea when that.
Yeah.
We're in recess.